up on the show today, of course, the countdown to the Chan Championship that kicks off this weekend is reaching fever pitch, and the die is cast. Wedson Nyirenda has named his 23-man squad. We analyze that one. But we start off with a little chit-chat we had with FAZ Supremo, the president of the Football Association of Zambia. Andrew Kamanga was in conversation with us about the year that was, 2017, and what we can expect by way of targets in 2018. Let's take a listen.
Thank you, Mr. Kamanga, for taking time to speak to us. Just tell us your reflection from a football house perspective, how the year 2017 was and how successful and successful it was.
Well, I think 2017 was an exciting year. I think it was our second year in office, and we obviously were looking to do things slightly different from the first year in office, 2016. If you look at the beginning of the year, it was very good. I think we did have finally the constitution amended as requested by FIFA. I think the first AGM went through and amended the constitution, and we were compliant, and we were able to avoid the FIFA ban. And then February, March, we hosted the Under-20 Africa Cup, which fortunately we were able to win. And then, of course, we earned the right to represent Africa in the World Cup. But prior to that, we also participated in the Four Nation Invitation Tournament in Korea, where we came out second. We went to the World Cup in May. Again, was a remarkable achievement. So we were very, very happy with the performance of the Under-20. If you look at the women's teams, we didn't do very well. I think both teams got eliminated in the first round. So that was a bit disappointing, but I think we are taking measures in 2018 to make sure that the women teams are prepared adequately, and we invest more in training of the technical staff. Coming to the senior team, again, it was an exciting period. The senior team was able to go to COSAFA, and they finished in the final. They came out second to Zimbabwe, which was a good outing. Prior to that, we had arranged two friendlies, I think one against Gabon as well as South Africa. And then, of course, we had the World Cup qualifiers to play. And as you know, in 2016, we had played the first game against Nigeria at home, which we lost. But 2017, we were looking forward to build on that loss. Fortunately, we were able to get results against Algeria, both at home and away. And then we went to Nigeria, which was really the decider of the group. Unfortunately, we lost out to Nigeria 1-0. Of course, the soccer fans were particularly not happy with that result, because it created its own debate. But as you'll appreciate, football is played by the rules, and in accordance with Article 15.6 of the competition for the World Cup 2018, all the members participating were clearly told that you cannot contest the referee's decision. Of course, there were decisions which were made, I think, involving South Africa and Senegal. But again, I think people didn't understand that that particular decision had nothing to do with the referee's performance, but it was to do with the referee being accused of involving himself in match manipulation. So having lost to Nigeria, we had the last game to play against Cameroon, which we drew 2-2 at home. But overall, I think for the senior team, it was a very good year, because we were able to build a stronger team than we had in 2016. We saw the likes of Patson Daka, Fashion Sakala, Enoch Mwepu coming into the senior team. We also brought in new players such as Justin Shonga and Brad Mwila, who were instrumental in the COSAFA, also graduating to the senior team. But overall, I think we've now got a very strong team taking us forward. On the Africa Cup qualifiers for 2019, we played Mozambique at home, and unfortunately we lost that game. So we are going to start the qualifiers again this year in September. We should have started in March, but CAF has changed the program because they want to allow the teams that are representing Africa in the World Cup in June to prepare adequately. So the March qualifiers have been pushed back to September. So going forward, I think we think that 2017 was a reasonably good year, and we can obviously build on that and see where we are going. Administratively, we had a lot of challenges around player registration. I think we had issues around the transfer of Waterwalia, the ITCs. I think there was also the case of Shamujompa. But over and above that, I think as an executive, we took a decision that we should address these underlying challenges to do with registration by streamlining the registration office. Of course, we take responsibility for some of the errors which could have been made because they emanated from our side, and clearly we didn't want to absorb ourselves from that problem. But going forward, we were able to engage even FIFA to see if we could proceed with the amnesty as opposed to docking points. Of course, depending on who you are and where you finished on the league, there was always arguments that this was an illegal operation, but of course FIFA endorsed it. And again, for the record, FIFA has asked for all the international transfers which were contentious in the last 4 or 5 years, so they are going to do their own independent investigation, and whatever results will come will inform whoever will be affected. Okay. So in a nutshell, that sort of sums up our 2017 season.
Let's talk about delinking of the league. You made an announcement that the league was going to be delinked. We understand that this will be a process. Where are we, and what should we expect in 2018 regards the same?
Yes, I think we took a decision as an executive simply because the dynamics have shifted. As you will appreciate, we had a few challenges. Again, 2017, I always use the example of the City of Lusaka issue with Vodacom and MTN as something that wasn't good for football, but lessons have since been learned, and we think that going forward, we need to streamline the sort of sponsorship packages that we have. Because I think that City of Lusaka Vodacom issue was stemming from the fact that MTN had the exclusive rights to sponsor the league, which obviously wouldn't allow a competing company with MTN to go and do the same. But we think that we now have a better position to renegotiate the terms and conditions of the contracts, and I think this is why we are now opening up the sponsorship. We've already engaged the stakeholders, especially those clubs affected, that we are not going to go ahead and sign off a new contract for the league without their involvement. But beyond the current sponsorship, we've been approached by several other possible sponsors to the league, so there's a possibility we may not have an exclusive league, but it will now have several sponsors who obviously come in different forms. And I think from that point, we now saw the opportunity that the only way we are going to increase sponsorship into the league is to delink the league completely from the association, so that the league is able to generate its own sponsorship, and it's then able to create its own value and run independently. As you will appreciate, if you talk to the clubs, the biggest complaint they have is that each time the national team is playing international fixtures, they have to lose their players. The rules are very clear. You are only allowed as a club to release your player for international duties when it is on a FIFA recommended date. So that is not in dispute. But as a consequence, we've ended up again, as a historical issue, deferring or cancelling league matches to allow the national team to fulfill international engagement. So we believe that if we separate the two, the association will focus on running the national team affairs, and then the league will run independently. So issues to do around the money that is coming to the league will go direct to the league. It won't come through the FA. I think in 2017 we had an example of the Barclays Cup, where one team pulled out claiming that the amounts of monies being offered were not adequate. Of course, we took up the initiative, met the clubs who were involved. We also spoke to the sponsor and raised our concerns. So we hope that in 2018 there will be a totally different shift in the way the sponsorship package is going to be structured. So the delinkage of the league is something that is moving. The committee was announced immediately at the end of the season, and I think they've had their first meeting last week. And we hope that before the next season starts, we'll be able to get the recommendations. But the process will also involve the clubs themselves. They will also have to go and make representations in terms of how they see themselves fitting into this new order. But most importantly also for the clubs, there's the element of club licensing, which is integral to the management of the league. Our league has also become very competitive. We've seen a lot of foreign players coming in, and I think it's now time for us to consider putting in regulation to make sure that we attract the right foreign players into the league. So all those aspects will be addressed.
Okay, let's talk about sponsorship and playing football that is reflective of the cost, that playing football as a business. 2017, there was that complaint on the part of Power Dynamos. Could 2017 be the last year that we'll hear complaints like that, that running the football club and participating in the league is not commensurate, or there's no real value that teams can draw in terms of prize money that they get after all is said and done?
Well, you need to understand that matters would want to initiate changes. All these things were contractual. We had a contract with Supersport. We have a contract with MTN, which fortunately has come to an end. And in between, there wasn't much that could be done. Even the case I referred to for City of Lusaka, it was very, very difficult. But now that the contract has come to an end, we've got an opportunity to now renegotiate and demonstrate to our partners that there is value in what we are doing. Because all these things were agreed 3-4 years ago. Even the prize money, who gets what. I saw the last teams, I think, getting something like 7,000. But if you compare that with the cost of participating in the league, it's a drop in the ocean. But I think this is why now we want to open up the sponsorship to a pool of sponsors so that it's not exclusive to one sponsor. And then at least with that approach, we should now be able to see an increase in the sponsorship, and then also make sure that the clubs are getting value from whatever else we are doing.
Let's talk about cup competitions. Do we expect new cup competitions in 2018?
We've got 2 offers on the table from possible cup sponsors. We just haven't finalized in terms of the format and what is in it. Again, these are issues which we are talking about. We don't want to go and introduce a new cup where the winner will take 100,000, but it won't be worthwhile. So I think we are still trying to have that conversation of ensuring that we negotiate the best value for our members. And at that point, before we even sign off, we'll call the stakeholders involved to also have their input, so that we are transparent in everything we are doing. We don't want the situation where, I mean, if we wanted to sign and tick off all the boxes, you can easily get a sponsor for a cup for 50,000, but is that worthwhile? I don't think so. So what we are doing is being systematic, ensuring that we recognize for a start that we've got value, our members have also got value, and we think that there has to be the right balance between that value and the level of sponsorship that you're going to attract. And I think this is what has sort of slowed down the conversations. But also we've committed ourselves. We want to operate in a transparent manner where we do not commit our members' interest without their consent. So we are open. Whatever we negotiate and agree on, we also want to get their input so that at the end of the day, if we are all agreeable, we want to avoid what we witnessed last year with the Barclays. Even with Barclays, we've got into some conversation. I think there will be a change in 2018 in the way the format will run.
It seems that the ghost of the structure adjustment program, where would have a lot of caps in the 90s, is somewhat still haunting us. How easy or difficult is it to get sponsorship, and not only sponsorship, but that which reflects the commercial value and which makes business sense?
This is exactly what I'm explaining, that if you wanted us to get sponsorship, we've got 3-4 offers on the table right now as we speak, but we believe that those do not represent the sort of value that we are looking for. And I think this is why we keep going back to renegotiate, because ultimately we want this thing to reflect the value that we've created. And I think where we are going now, we are likely to get even better sponsors. But we have to start from somewhere.
Let's talk about the forecast for 2018. Where to?
2018, very exciting. In fact, 2017, I forgot to mention, we qualified to CHAN, and the tournament is starting next weekend. In fact, this weekend on Saturday, the first game. Zambia plays on Sunday, and we hope that it will be a good starting point for the senior national team, for those players who are playing in Africa. We think that they've also got an opportunity to go and showcase their skills. Some of the players may be picked and move on to other leagues, which I think is a good start. So, from a technical point, we are very happy. We've now got an acting technical director in place. That office wasn't manned for some time in 2017, but we think that going forward, that office will become very, very critical to the different programs that we are going to look at. We still remain committed to engage in youth development as well as grassroots football. We've signed an MOU with the Ministry of Education and Ministry of Sport to support grassroots football. We are also taking an initiative as FAZ to restart what was your Airtel Rising Stars, with or without sponsorship, but we will go to all the districts, all the provinces, and start the talent identification in earnest within 2018. So we are looking at doing that for both boys and girls, so that we develop and identify talent at a much early stage as the players develop. So 2018 is very exciting. We've obviously got the CHAN, where we've set a target at least to get to the semi-final. We also have our usual tournaments. COSAFA is coming in for under 17, under 20 women's teams, and we also have the Africa Cup qualifiers for the women's. We've also got the 2019 AFCON qualifiers to play in September and October. So it's a reasonably busy year. I also forgot to mention, last year our under 17 were able to win the COSAFA Cup, and we hosted the under 20 COSAFA, where we used the same under 17 team. Of course, the soccer fans were not particularly happy with that process, but I think we got guidance, because we promoted all the teams. The previous under 20 is now under 23, and whatever was under 17 moved up to under 20, and then now we have to build a new under 17 team, as well as under 15 and under 13. Going forward, we've got qualifiers for the under 20. We are the defending champions, and we have to qualify to go and defend the the cup in Niger in 2019. So this is why strategically we took the younger players who we believe will be eligible to play and be under 20 in 2019. Of course, the results were not forthcoming. We lost the first game, drew the second game and won the last game, but this is a young side. There is still a few areas where we can work on, but we think that we'll build an even better under 20 than we had, simply because we'll take them through the same paces that we took the previous under 20 with international training camps and give them as much exposure as possible. So this is a continuous process that we're looking at in terms of rebuilding.
As the captain of the FAZ ship, are you comfortable with the current state of affairs where we have to get part-time coaches for the under 17, under 20, and probably the under 23? Would it be a better scenario where we robbed Numba Mamba based on championship to be full-time coaches of those teams?
Ideally, if you ask me, that would be the best scenario. But of course, we've got financial limitations, and we hope that with the introduction of our own brand, we should be able to generate enough money to be able to meet our costs. Because we do have an idea in terms of how much we think we should be able to generate and how much budget we should have to sustain all the activities of the association. Given a choice, we would want all the national teams to be manned by full-time national coaches. So we need a national team coach for Chan, for under 23, for under 20, for under 17, on a full-time basis. So we are slowly trying to get to that position. But of course, with resources being available, we should be able to get there.
Let's talk about COPA. This past week, the Football Association of Zambia made an announcement that we are going into unprecedented waters. We are going to be kitting ourselves. Just give us a bit of background and why you've opted to go that route.
Well, I think like everything else, this is purely business. You will appreciate that prior to us coming into office, I think the previous executive had a contract with Nike, which unfortunately was lapsed, and there was no renewal. And then if you look at the traditional brand carriers within Africa, they've also cut their markets. If you look at Nike itself, they're only looking after two teams, South Africa and Nigeria. In fact, before Nigeria came in, it was Zambia. So we lost that spot to Nigeria. If you look at Puma, I think they've only got Cameroon and Ghana. So their focus has equally shifted because they want to focus on the bigger European markets where they are getting more value. So when it comes to negotiating a kit sponsorship deal, it becomes a bit of a challenge in that 3/4 of the players in the market are not willing to give you a cash component on the deal. All they offer is to kit your national team, and then you also buy the replicas from them, and then you go into a profit sharing. So when you look at that experience, and I think this is why when we brought in Mafro, they gave us a reasonably competitive offer. They promised to give us a very good cash deal, and they were also willing to give us a very lucrative replica deal. But unfortunately, they only supplied us with the playing kit, and the rest of the commitments were not met. And at some point, we had to take action. And I think the action was to review the contract and give notice that we'll let it run up to the end of the year. And come 2018, we've taken a decision as an executive that we are now going to create our own brand and then look at the possibility of ensuring that we sustain ourselves. Now, the dynamics are obviously slightly different than in our favor, in that the same people who produce for Nike, Puma, Adidas, are the same people who are going to produce for us. and all we have to do is agree on the design. The quality is just going to be as good. So our soccer fans don't need to worry too much about that. We'll get the best quality. Most importantly, we'll still be able to bring and land the replica jerseys at a reasonably affordable price, so that we make it affordable and ensure that it doesn't compete with the black market. And again, it will be a brand of our own, and we hope that with the decisions which we took last year, where we are going to be providing equipment support to the lower division teams by giving them footballs as well as jerseys, even that particular requirement will be met from our own brand. Because as you know, last year we spent quite a bit of money buying the kit off the shelf to meet the commitments to our members. But this year, we just want to make sure that all these lower division teams are also supported with the same kit, but it will be our brand. And obviously, from a business perspective, we are saving a bit of money and ensuring that we are delivering the right quality. And we can only appeal to our stakeholders as well as our supporters to help us with this brand. We are obviously going to have a proper launch. We are going to market it, and it's something that will cut across all the other sports disciplines. So we want a brand where if people in rugby want a national kit, they should be able to go to copper. By the way, copper is the copper, the mainstay of our economy, the mineral. But we couldn't use the letters COPPER simply because for marketing purposes it becomes a bit of a challenge, because copper, the product, is known worldwide. So we replace that with a copper. If you go to the copper belt, you even have these words, Copperland. So it's just KOPA, but it's a reflection of copper, the mineral.
Did you envisage a situation where would be quote unquote veering away from core business? That sounds like starting a new company altogether. But you've studied the ramifications of that.
Of course, but it's not any different from delinking the league, because the league itself is going to run independent of the association. It's going to now be the one involved in looking for sponsorship and ensuring that the value is retained to those members who are part of the league. So even this issue of the kit, we don't want the situation where we start losing value. We would even be happy to be a small partner in this thing, but we needed to make a start. And the fact that we've started, we've now created a platform where everyone else can be part of it. And we think that from a commercial point of view, it makes a lot of business sense, because we don't lose that much value. We will retain the value inland.
Tell me, what are the performance targets for the year? And what would you like to achieve? Of course, the Olympics, the junior teams, the women's teams. What are the performance targets this year? And I asked this question because weeks ago we had your office suggesting that the target is semi-final for Chan, for instance, and then we had a comment from the technical bench suggesting at some point that the target would be quarter-final.
Yeah, you see, this is the problem, because we set the targets and communicate to the technical team. We can run through those very quickly. For Chan, we set a target of semi-finals, a minimum. We've also got to qualify for the Africa Cup for 2019. We also want the under-23 to qualify to the finals of the 2020 Olympics. We also want the women's teams to qualify for Africa Cup and World Cup. We also want to make sure that all these teams deliver to the expectations of the executive. So we've set ourselves very good targets. If you look at the club competitions, we've now got 4 teams in CAF, 2 are in the Champions League, 2 in the club competition. Even there, we think that all our teams have got a good chance to make it into the round of 16. So we can only hope that all these activities are going to be a reflection of the improvement of the game.
All right, Andrew Kamanga, president of the Football Association of Zambia, speaking to us earlier today.